Okay, welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving into something truly fascinating, a radically different model of rehabilitation and global strategy. Today, we're unpacking what's known as the Sovereign Healing Nexus. It's this comprehensive, Torah-based ethical leadership fellowship that looks at combat veterans, specifically those transitioning out of intense military service, not just as people who need to reintegrate into civilian life, but literally as potential global stewards of peace. We're going to see how this framework fundamentally transforms these service members through a really unique, highly structured blend of theology, biology, and cutting-edge technology.
Now, to really grasp this incredible hero's journey, we've got to start with a massive, profound question. How in the world do you transition someone from the absolute chaos of war into a creator of global peace? Standard models usually just try to mitigate the pathology of trauma, right? Just get people back to a baseline. But this fellowship asks something much bigger. What if we could actually elevate that experience? What if the intense, split-second operational skills learned in combat could be rewired and actively directed toward wiping out resource scarcity and human conflict entirely?
So here is our roadmap for how they pull this off. First, we'll look at the lone soldier's burden. Second, somatic healing and detox. Third, the 3 training phases. Fourth, Genie, their ethical AI firewall. And finally, cultivating global peace.
Let's start right in with Part 1, the Lone Soldier's Burden.
This entire fellowship is built specifically around what are known as lone soldiers. These are active personnel serving in the Israel Defense Forces who just don't have an immediate family support network in the country. Maybe they're volunteers from overseas, or maybe they come from ultra-Orthodox backgrounds and their families actually rejected them for choosing to serve. As the sources point out, this creates an incredibly heavy burden. We're talking about young men and women dealing with acute isolation, geographic displacement, and the deep, complex moral residue that naturally accumulates during high-stakes combat operations. They're carrying a massive psychological weight, and for the most part, they're carrying it entirely alone.
Which brings us to Part 2, somatic healing and detox. What's so interesting here is that this fellowship doesn't just treat trauma as a psychological disorder, they treat it as a biological disruption. Think about the contrast. When these interns arrive straight from conflict zones, their bodies are literally wired for survival. They're flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, stuck in hypervigilance, and usually running on processed legacy foods. The healing state completely flips that script. They replace the chaotic energy of war with profound spiritual rest, drawing heavily on the concept of the Sabbath. Add in whole food, plant-based nutrition, and the rhythmic, active moving meditation of permaculture labor in agricultural towers, and you have a total physiological reset.
Honestly, this isn't just some weekend wellness retreat. We're talking about a rigorous biological detox protocol. And this is where it gets super unique. The program takes secular nutritional science, specifically Dr. Michael Greger's Daily Dozen, and a strict SOS-free diet, meaning zero added sugar, oil, or salt, and they anchor it directly within spiritual law. They reframe it through the Torah principle of Shmiras Haguf, which is the sacred mandate to physically guard your own body. Because of this, eating right isn't just a doctor's suggestion, it becomes an absolute operational duty. Conquering the dinner plate is quite literally step 1 in conquering the battlefield of the self.
Moving right along to Part 3, the 3 training phases. All of this biological healing is perfectly structured into a progressive 90-day onboarding map. The entire goal is to transition these veterans from trauma-induced hypervigilance to sovereign ethical leadership capabilities. It provides a very clear pathway from feeling scattered and fragmented to achieving real sovereign agency. Let's look at how this timeline actually builds step by step. Phase 1, which is the first 2 weeks, is purely focused on biological and spiritual detox, just getting the system clean. Then in Phase 2, called the Mount Zion integration, they start untangling geopolitical history right alongside their own personal trauma. Finally, in Phase 3, they face a graduation process called tokenizing the soul, where they undergo an audit and have to prove they've deeply internalized this new spiritual discipline.
The psychological objectives here are absolutely wild. Step 1 forces them to realize that, hey, that intense craving for processed sugar, it might actually just be a masked trauma response. Step 2 pairs that personal biological untangling with historical untangling, teaching them that you need a cleanly fueled brain and body to achieve systemic global peace. And Step 3 ensures that only those who truly view their health as an act of sacred stewardship get to graduate as what the program calls Earth Guardians.
Okay, Part 4, GMI, the ethical AI firewall.
Once an Earth Guardian goes through this intense healing and training, they are equipped with some incredibly advanced technology. But the core mandate never changes. As the program states, the Earth Guardian isn't just surviving their past anymore, they exist as a living sanctuary. They are out to prove that the highest possible form of global defense is the uncompromising ethical stewardship of one's own biology. And to make sure their real-world logistical decisions stay ethically pure on a massive scale, they interface with a highly specialized AI.
This is GenAI, which stands for Generative Intentional Intelligence. Now, unlike standard AI, the stuff that optimizes for your attention or for maximum corporate profit, GenAI is an intent engine. It essentially acts as a strict algorithmic ethical firewall. If an Earth Guardian proposes a logistical move that's extractive or relies on old-school zero-sum military logic, GenAI literally won't allow it. It automatically reroutes the action. It physically forces operations toward the least path of resistance, making sure the technology always aligns with mutual thriving and nonviolence.
And GenAI isn't just making up its own morals either. Its algorithms are hardwired to a triad of ancient theological principles. It uses Tselem Elohim, the concept that every single human has infinite dignity because they are created in the divine image. It uses the Noahide covenant as a baseline framework for universal justice and interfaith diplomacy, and it uses the Maimonidean vision to aim for post-scarcity infrastructure. It's literally programming ancient wisdom right into modern global supply chains.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Cultivating Global Peace.
This is the ultimate strategic horizon of the whole fellowship, the Maimonidean vision. Moses Maimonides described an ideal future not as some mystical, supernatural magic, but as a very tangible geopolitical reality where there is literally no hunger and no war. The fellowship operates on a pretty straightforward premise. The root cause of almost all human conflict is resource scarcity. So if you want true security, you don't just build a bigger military defense. You build a system that proactively generates absolute, unyielding, universal abundance.
So, what does this actually look like on the ground? Well, Earth Guardians deploy self-sustaining ARQ-18 modular habitats into areas that lack resources. These are closed-loop units that churn out clean water, energy, and nutrition. They also engage a peace-for-profit economic model, selling nutritional products like the Barnes Miracle Bar to directly fund global hunger relief. And they mine equity in the system through what they call spiritual proof of work, which means verifiable real-world improvements in physical health and agricultural output. By delivering these vital resources entirely apolitically, they can completely bypass those deeply entrenched ideological stalemates in regions like the Middle East. It's a real game changer.
I really want to leave you reflecting on this one powerful thought. If we accept the premise that the absolute highest form of defense isn't a weapon at all, but rather the uncompromising deployment of clean water, energy, and whole food nutrition, how does that fundamentally rewire our view of global leadership? This framework challenges every one of us to reconsider how true peace is practically built, and proves that healing the individual is, quite literally, the very first step in healing the world. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and keep asking those big questions.